I grew up unchurched. I'm a baptized Roman Catholic, but we didn't even go on Christmas and Easter, so it doesn't count. But when I became the music director here 16 years and 5 weeks ago, I was... That's a long time. My tenure here can drive. When I became the music director here, I was more familiar with Jewish liturgical music, which there's a little bit of in our hymnals, than with Christian liturgical music, which there's a lot more of in our hymnals. But it was time for me to start planning music for services, and I had these two books. 415 hymns in singing the living tradition, also called the gray hymnal or the old hymnal. And 75 hymns in singing the journey, the new hymnal or the teal hymnal, though many of you have waxed poetic on the actual shade of blue-green it is over the years. I was running blind. I would look up key words that the minister would tell me were going to be in the service. I'd look them up in the back of the hymnal, which has a topical hymn index. That's every hymnal. I don't know if you know that, but it's cool. If I liked the songs I found, I would play through them, I'd sing them, I'd program them, and then we would all sing them together on a Sunday morning. After a couple of months of this, a longtime member approached me and said, "Don, I love the energy you're bringing to the hymns, but could we just sing some things we know?" I said, "Yes, we can." What do we know? I had no idea. I mean, I was new to this. Several members of the choir and members on the staff, we all got together and they showed me the hymns people were particularly fond of. And I noticed there weren't very many from the new hymnal at the time, which was only 3 years old. So we started digging into this. It was only 3 years old then. One Sunday, we closed a service with the Bill Withers classic, "Lean on Me," number 1021 in the teal hymnal. And after a member of the task force that hired me said, "You know, I don't really want us to do so much contemporary music on Sunday mornings." Saying contemporary with that edge of disdain is how people have been saying, "I am uncomfortable with change." For centuries, right? Music that is now considered the highest, holiest music in the Catholic Church was banned for being too contemporary. It sounded like this. Too contemporary. Way too contemporary, right? That's right, polyphonic music, where one line sings and another line sings a different text, was hotly debated in the Catholic Church and was briefly, for like 100 years, was banned by the Catholic Church until Giovanni Palestrina, who wrote that song the choir just sang part of, in 1604, convinced the cardinals and Pope otherwise, because it's just real pretty, right? It's very beautiful. So when someone told me that "Lean on Me" was just too contemporary to be part of a service, I did bring up that it was released 12 years before I was born. Of course, I know what the person meant, right? They wanted the music in our services to all be classical because that's what they loved the most. They could stomach a folk song every so often, but I added a drum to "Lean on Me," and that was a bridge too far. So how did "Lean on Me" get into our UU hymnal? In his essay, "Changing the Words, an Historical Introduction to Unitarian Universalist Hymnody," Jason Shelton wrote, It is my contention that a hymn book represents the theological and ecclesial self-understanding of a religious movement at a particular moment in history. Even for a movement like Unitarian Universalism, which claims to hold no particular text as more sacred than any other, our hymn books have functioned very much like sacred scripture. They serve as proselytization tools for visitors to our churches by making statements about our common values and beliefs through the theological content of the hymn texts and the variety of musical traditions whence we draw our tunes. Further, we can note the rate of theological evolution in our movement by paying close attention to the longevity of any particular hymn book. The call for a new hymn book almost always comes from the sense of the current tome being out of date, of there being something about the book which doesn't quite capture the essence of who and what we are anymore, end quote. So the history of UU hymnody is fascinating, and we're just going to dip our toes this morning, just a little bit of it. The first Universalist hymnal was printed in 1776. There was a lot going on then. And the first Unitarian hymnal followed 7 years later, right? In the 1800s, Unitarians and Universalists produced more than 50 hymnals. This speaks to congregations' tendencies towards individualism, as many hymnals were compiled by ministers for their specific congregations. This hymnal right here, it's called Church Harmonies New and Old, was published by the Universalist Church of Swampscott, Massachusetts in 1895. It's the oldest one I have. It was around the same time that late 19th century, when Unitarians and Universalists produced more official and widely used hymnals nationally. Many of you know that Unitarians and Universalists consolidated into one faith in 1961, but they actually came together to make a hymnal called Hymns of the Spirit 25 years earlier. I know, it's cool. From the editor's note, the editors have particularly sought for hymns with a strong ethical note. This is 1937. So, hymns with a strong ethical note which emphasize the newer social applications of religion, and for hymns which give expression to modern conceptions of the human soul and its relation to the universe. A hymn book intended for continued service by a given constituency cannot be merely an anthology of the great hymns of the ages, for a large proportion of even the great hymns written by the generations that are gone express other ideas and ideals than those of today. They have their secure place in the literature of Christian devotion, but they often speak a language which we cannot make our own. Such is inevitably the case wherever religion is regarded as a living experience, forever taking on new forms with the passing centuries, rather than as a fixed and static revelation to which no one may add and from which none may take anything away. So far as the great hymns of the church can still be used as a genuine utterance of a living faith, they have been retained. So far as modern hymns express the thought of our day in a reasonable adaptation of lyrical form, they have been eagerly accepted. And they have also included a limited number of hymns, especially among those for Christmas, which are endeared to not a few people by tradition, although they may express theological ideas no longer held in a literal sense. That is way too much to read from the foreword of a book, I know, but it's cool, isn't it? It's really great. It was 1937. There's so much to take in, and I will repeat this sentence. Such is inevitably the case wherever religion is regarded as a living experience, forever taking on new forms with passing centuries, rather than as a fixed and static revelation to which no one may add, and from which none may take anything away. That's like a sermon series there. Like 2 months of sermons could be on that sentence. So one of the first things that happened when Unitarians and Universalists merged in 1961 was the commissioning of another hymnal, right? Hymns for the Celebration of Life was published in 1964, and it included a large number of American folk tunes which expanded the pool of musical and cultural resources from which UUs might draw their common worship. But this hymnal had a comparatively short shelf life. 1964 was the year Bob Dylan wrote, "The times they are a-changin'." And as an aside, it was only 8 years before Bill Withers wrote "Lean on Me." But social unrest, and particularly the growth of feminism and the women's movement, made clear some problems with the new hymnal of 1964. Using words like man, mankind, and brotherhood to putting all of humanity under a masculine umbrella just wasn't going to cut it anymore, right? Much like we're working to remove binary language, solely binary language from our hymnal text today. There also was a concerted effort to remove gendered God language and songs about submission and dominion, which don't speak well to Unitarian Universalists. This growth in our social and theological beliefs led to paperback versions of this hymnal that just kept shrinking. Right? They had 327 usable hymns, and eventually that was cut to 58. It's cut down to 58. All leading up to the creation of Singing the Living Tradition, right? The new hymnal of 1993. Singing the Living Tradition was the first standard denominational hymnal to include songs from Unitarians in Eastern Europe, like the anthem the choir sang, "Find a Stillness," here in that hymnal. It includes many songs from the African American tradition, folk and popular songs, music from major non-Christian religious traditions, and chants and rounds gathered from various traditions all over the world. The folks who put it together were conscious of language issues, though, of course, language has evolved in 31 years. We are progressives. Progressive means progress. Progress means change. Singing the Journey, the newest new hymnal, was really just a supplement to Singing the Living Tradition, but it leans heavily into multiculturalism, religious pluralism, and songs that weren't written specifically for religious purposes, but speak deeply to other UU ideas and ideals. It took 11 minutes to get to "I Lean on Me" is in the hymnal. There it is. We got there. We got there. 33 years after it was written, put in the UU hymnal. Friends, all of this hymnal talk is because this month the UUA has started beta testing the next UU hymnal. I know, 19 years after our last new hymnal, the new hymnal will be entirely virtual. All of the hymns will have printable sheet music and chord sheets and lyrics. They will have available recordings. Many will have alternate arrangements, much like we do on Sunday morning. This morning, we've done a lot of hymns fairly standard, but about 50% of the hymns we do are just weird things I made up. Our version of Blue Boat Home, Jeep made up 12 years ago, right? We do a different version than everybody else. It's just something that we do here. Most importantly, the virtual hymnal will be updated on a rolling basis, at least yearly, hopefully quarterly. So we don't have to wait 19 years for new hymns, right? This excites me as a music director. I've been adding hymns to our service. "Let the life I lead speak for me" isn't in the hymnal. We just started singing it like 10 years ago, and I like it, so we do it sometimes, right? But we'll be able to add these new songs. It's exciting for me as a music director to plan new things, but also we'll be learning and singing the same songs as our UU siblings all over the world. I know, it is cool. Yeah. The virtual hymnal is going to include most of the songs that are in Singing the Journey and Singing the Living Tradition. And since we as a congregation own 300 copies of each, this is like a third of what's in my office. Since we own like 300 copies of each, we can keep singing the songs we love forever, right? But there's also a profound commitment to fairly compensating musicians who write our hymns and arrange our hymns. And there'll be much more information to come on this hymnal, how you can access it yourself when it gets out of beta testing, hopefully around General Assembly 2025. That's this next upcoming summer. Our hymnals represent who we are at a given moment in history. Because ours is a living faith, we sing a living tradition, one which must constantly change if it is to continue to reflect an accurate picture of our religious community and our religious movement. I hope you join me in the excitement that a new hymnal will bring to our services and to Unitarian Universalism.